Hey y'all, Erin Whitmer here. I'm here to share a fun lesson that God kind of deposited in me in the last week or so. First, I want to tell you how I came up with this idea that I'm going to share with you all today. So I was in Florida last week. I was down there with my family. My grandfather had a really terrible health scare, and so we all drove down there. We didn't know what was going to happen. Really, at first we thought that he was going to die, but thank God the surgery tacked on some extra years to his life. So we're so thankful for that. But while I was there, I had the fortune of staying in my grandfather's gorgeous home in St. Augustine. And if you have never been there, oh my goodness, it's just so beautiful there. Just gorgeous trees and perfect weather, and we were just a couple of blocks away from the beach. And so one night, all of us ladies, this was my mom and my aunt and my cousin and me, we all took a walk. And it was dark and it was late, and we were just having one of those really fun, joyous girl moments. You know, we were acting goofy and silly and, you know, really no men allowed kind of thing. They just wouldn't have gotten it. So we had a great time walking to the beach. And as we were walking, we smelled something amazing, and we didn't know what it was. It was so sweet, kind of like honey, a little bit like honeysuckle, but there was something different about it, something almost fruity about it, and it was just incredible. And so we're kind of like super noses. That's what we like to call ourselves. You know, I mean, this thing can smell really good. My husband makes fun of me all the time because if there's something to sniff out, I can do it. So we all had our little super sniffers going, and we're trying to figure out where this amazing scent is coming from. And so we're sniffing all around. Okay, you get the idea. And so finally we find this tree or a bush or something. It was dark out. We had no idea what was happening. So we took our little flashlights out on our iPhones, and we're trying to look at it to see what it is, to figure out what this amazing mystery is, because if we could have bottled it and taken it with us, we would have. We were completely entranced by this scent. So we didn't figure out what it was that night. We saw that it had some little white flowers. We weren't really sure. It was still nighttime. So the next day I was walking from dinner with my mom, and we smelled it again. We're like, smell it, where is it? And so we're in a neighborhood and we're looking around, we're trying to figure out where it is. And my mother's very prim and proper. She doesn't do anything that's against the rules. And I'm like, I need to figure out what this smell is because it is amazing. And so I start sniffing around, and I see something in somebody's yard that looks like it has blossoms on it. And so I sneak into his yard. Again, it's kind of dark. It's nighttime again, but there was luckily neighborhood lights around here. And sure enough, on that tree was these little white flowers, and I took my flashlight and I looked at it, and then I saw right next to it an orange. And so you know, okay, it was an orange tree. We had no idea, absolutely no idea. So then I started thinking, and all of a sudden it occurred to me, gosh, orange blossom, I've heard of that. It's on candles, it's all over the place. Orange blossom. Orange blossoms smell really amazing. I didn't know, and it never occurred to me. So I started doing some research, and guess what else I found out? And those of you who are from Florida, you are probably laughing right now because we sound so ridiculous and ignorant about this. Well, apparently the orange blossom is the state flower of Florida. It's obvious now because it smells so amazing. There's huge festivals dedicated to it. We know that oranges are pretty much the main export fruit of Florida. So all of this seems so obvious, but yet I didn't know. And how many times do we have kind of that experience? I think just as people or even as believers, you know, we've got this incredible God who loves us and who does so much for us. And he's throwing all sorts of events, and we're like, I didn't know. Because until you know, you don't know, right? So that's kind of the nature of it. So as I started researching this and I started looking into oranges and kind of thinking about the notion of this amazing smelling fruit and of these gorgeous bushes / trees. I'm not a botanist. This is not my area of expertise. I've just done a little bit of research here. But what I found out was really fascinating. And so I've kind of crafted a lesson based on some of the things that I learned in my research about oranges. And so the topic that I want to talk with you about today is what I learned about spiritual fruit from an orange. So what I learned about spiritual fruit from an orange, and that is what I want to pass on to you today. So the first point is this: we can produce fruit while preparing to produce fruit at the same time. So let me unpack this a little bit for you. Orange trees can have blossoms and fruit at the exact same time. In my experience, and again, I'm not a botanist, but we have a lot of flowering trees in our backyard and a lot of flowering plants, and I don't often see a bunch of flowers and a bunch of fruit on a tree at the same time. They usually kind of harvest, or that fruit comes about at the same time. So all those blossoms are turning into fruit around the same time. If you are a gardener or a person who is an expert in trees, and I'm wrong about this, please feel free to comment and tell me. But here's what I want to point out to you that I think is really interesting, is that the orange tree can have blossoms and the fruit at the same time. So when I was looking at it, I saw a beautiful orange, and I also saw that beautiful fragrant fruit. Sometimes as believers, we get really wrapped up in the fruit that we're producing. So that fruit could be discipling others, it could be mentoring others, it could be leading Bible studies, it could be serving at your church, whatever it is. It could be absolutely anything. And sometimes the fruit that we produce isn't necessarily church related, but it's still a fruit coming out of us because of our love of God. You know, the way that we handle other people and the way that we handle situations. All of the things that come out of us from our relationship with Christ that we produce can be fruit. Okay, so have you ever thought about the fact that you could be producing fruit on one side, but then on the other side, you've got God who's working through you to try to produce more fruit. So we might be producing fruit, but we're also preparing to produce fruit at the same time. Point number 2. The fragrance of the flower is our sign that fruit is to come. So we were sniffing out those flowers, right? We smelled that scent and it was absolutely amazing. The fragrance for us was a sign that the fruit was coming, because the flower comes before the fruit. So the fragrance comes before the fruit. But here's what's really interesting about this. What if we think about this as a fragrant offering? And I'm going to read what Paul says in Philippians 10 verses 18 and 19. He says, he refers to the gifts as a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. So sometimes the sign of new fruit is that sacrifice. The sacrifice that you make as a mother, you're sacrificing so much, your time, your energy, that precious even ability to pee alone. Can I get an amen? You are sacrificing so many things. If you're a father, you're sacrificing really just so much. All of us are sacrificing every day in our journey as believers. But what if that sacrifice is the first step to that fruit? What if our sacrifice is that fragrance offering? And that's going to show everybody that fruit is coming when they come and they sniff our tree. That sounds funny, but you know what I mean. So sacrifice comes before the fruit. You can't disciple without dedicating time. You can't mentor without meaningful conversation. And you can't receive God without being receptive to God. And all of that comes with a sacrifice of some sort. All right, so let's talk about number 3. We threaten our fruit when we take on too much. So orange trees do this amazing thing, and they call it the premature drop. And so when these flowers are producing too many oranges and there's too many oranges on the tree is smart enough to know that it takes way too much energy to produce and grow all of those oranges to the size that they should be. What an interesting fact, right? That this tree knows what's good for it, basically. All right, so sometimes we are putting ourselves in so many different directions or doing so many different things because our desire is to produce fruit, and we're doing it with the best of intentions. We want to serve our God because we love our God, and so we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this, and we're doing that, and all of a sudden our energy is being expended in all of these different places, and what we need is a premature drop. We just need to go boom and drop some of that fruit, because we cannot produce the sweetest, ripest, best fruit when we are putting it into a million different places. So what are you doing in your life that's keeping you from producing your bigger fruit? If you're a mom, what are you doing that's keeping you from being able to disciple your children, from being able to spend time with your children? Do you have time to just sit down with them? So the question really is busyness stealing your harvest? Do you have too many little tiny oranges that you're trying to grow when you should be focusing on just a few big, beautiful, ripe, juicy oranges? Okay? All right, so number 4, the sweetest fruit takes time. Did you know that it takes between 5 and 18 months for an orange tree to produce just one orange? But then on top of that, you've got to tack on an additional 3 to 4 months just for that fruit to ripen. Is we have a tendency to pluck that fruit from the tree before it's had a chance to ripen, before it's had a chance to get nice and fruity and delicious and sweet, because we're impatient. Is anybody else impatient? I happen to be the most impatient person I know, and it's a struggle. I mean, it's a real struggle. Everything's a struggle. I mean, I don't even have patience to pump gas into my car. That takes time. So are you losing patience with your harvest without getting the tree the sufficient time to produce fruit? Think about that a second. How much time are you really allowing your tree to grow fruit? This is something that I love, and this is Paul again. Paul's my favorite. So Paul says in Philippians 3:13, remember, he talks about straining towards what is ahead. Now, straining is a really strong word. It's not a word like skipping along. I'm just skipping along, waiting for what's next. No, it's straining. There's struggle in that. There's tension in that. We know that when he visited Philippi, that this was his second missionary trip. So this wasn't his first time around the block. He wasn't a new kid. This was serious stuff. And so he had struggled. But here's the thing. He goes through all of that. So he knows that producing fruit is going to be a challenge. He knows that his journey ahead is going to be a challenge. And we need to accept that, and we need to know that, because we have a tendency to be impatient with our fruit production. But we've got to strain forward towards what is ahead, because that is when the greatest fruit of our lives is going. Are you willing to strain ahead to produce the kind of fruit that God wants you to produce? Number 5, oranges only ripen when they're connected to the tree. They will not ripen once you pick them. You cannot put them on the train and expect them to ripen on the way to the grocery store. That does not happen. Their sweetness reaches its maximum on the tree. They're not going to get sweet once they are off the tree. What do we get from this? This sounds familiar, doesn't it? I know that it does, because to me, as soon as I read this, I was like, duh. So Jesus says in John 15:4, remain in me, and I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I don't think we can get any clearer than that, do you? If we are disconnected from Christ, we are not producing fruit. There's no harvest coming from us. It's going to be a premature drop all over the place. Our little baby oranges are going to be dropping. There's not going to be any big, succulent, beautiful, sweet oranges. So we need to sacrifice our time and sit with Jesus, and this brings us back to that point number 2, right? That fragrance comes before the fruit, and that fragrance is an offering. It's a sacrifice of us. So for us, it's a sacrifice of our time at first. It might feel like you're doing the craziest thing for you to even be able to sit down with Jesus for 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day might even seem crazy to you. You're like, girl, I got like 3. I can give Jesus 3. All right, give him 3. Give him 3 days right now, 3 minutes a day, and see what that does. That might feel like a sacrifice of time for you, but eventually you're going to realize that you're sacrificing anything else that you can to get into the Word with him and to have that time with him, because you're going to be producing the sweetest, most amazing fruit of your life, and you're like, praise Jesus, this is incredible. And you're just going to want to plow through your harvest and spend more time with him. So I hope that you enjoyed your lesson today on spiritual fruit and the lessons that I learned from an orange. So thanks so much again. If you enjoyed this lesson, then please do follow me on Facebook, and also head over to my website and subscribe as well to my newsletter and to my blogs, and that is erinwhitmer.com. Thanks so much. I'm so thankful for you taking the time to watch this. Have a blessed day.